From Greater Sandton and beyond, get ready for the SANDTON Times Hour.
With your host,
Alexander.
Greetings and welcome to the SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM, and as always available as a podcast on Apple, Google and Spotify. I'm Alexander Leibbrandt. This is a gruesome edition 91, week 45. The last of October 2022, and November is on our doorstep. If you want to get in touch, you can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect on social media @SANDTON Times, and you can visit the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. And as always, you can get in touch, ask your questions, ask your comments, provide some feedback, and be part of the conversation right here on the SANDTON Times Hour. Thank you for making the time to listen and show your support all around the world and all around South Africa. I'm happy to report that all is well in Sandton land. Welcome to our Halloween edition. Spooky. Well, we're all in the dark. Well, I don't know if it's for load shedding or if it's for a more Halloween-themed edition, but if you're not in the dark, maybe it's worth turning off the lights and putting on the candles for this particular episode, because, we're going to have some very interesting conversations in the next hour. And if you're in the dark for load shedding, well, then you're already sitting with candles and torches, and you've already set the mood for what is an exciting and interesting evening. Vincenzo, what are you dressed up as? A vampire. Oh, you're in the mood, huh? You're at least thematically fitting in. If you're listening and you are listening live on Mix 93.8 FM, don't forget the WhatsApp line is open, so you can send us your WhatsApp. It's always great to hear from you. I saw a lot of engagement last week, which we didn't even get a chance to chat about, with low-cost airlines and domestic flights. I saw a lot of people had some thoughts on that. And Vincenzo, did you see this? The Guinness World Record declared Monday to be the worst day of the week. And I think there's probably a lot of people out there that said, well, we already know that. We didn't need the Guinness World Records title for Monday. Clearly, all these people who say that Monday is the worst day of the week, they don't listen to the SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM, do they? Well, spoilt for choice as always, another packed week of events. We headed down to Durban for Lift Airlines' inaugural flight to the East Coast. Then we managed to visit a few beautiful lodges and hotels down there, which I will touch on another week, because this week we're focusing on all things Halloween and some very spine-tingling conversations. Then Winex took place. Winex 2022 was back after 2 years of nothing. Did you manage to go? Did you have some wine? Did you taste some of the new vintages? Let me know. And then there were numerous Halloween parties taking place in and around Greater Sandton this past weekend as well. And let me know which one you went to. Was it any good? What did you go as? Send us some pictures. I want to see what costumes you came up with. Well, coming up on this week's episode, no headlines for this week, to make way for a special extended interview with a member of a group of ghost hunters in Johannesburg. Then we head down to the Western Cape to chat to the owner of a ghost walk around one of South Africa's oldest coastal towns. Next, he's one of South Africa's most renowned forensic psychologists who's released 2 gripping books. You don't want to miss this. And finally, there can be nothing more horrifying than being locked up in one of Africa's most notorious prisons. I'm joined by the man who survived Black Beach. No headlines, as I mentioned, for this week, but as always, let's get this week's show going with just the right kind of track to set the tone.
You're listening to the SANDTON Times Hour.
This is the SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM with the Andrea Bruno remix of Michael Jackson's legendary Thriller. Well, if that doesn't set the tone for this special Halloween edition of Vincenzo, I don't know what will. Right, moving right along to our first interview, and I'm thrilled to be joined again by someone that I've spoken to in the past on the podcast, now also on the radio show, and I'm glad to be connecting again with Wynand van Zyl. He is with Phoenix Paranormal. And Wynand, maybe to kick things off, what does Phoenix Paranormal do?
Well, basically, we're a paranormal investigation group. So we go to all the haunted locations, private and historic, and we try and find evidence of the paranormal.
Well, I mean, that's stuff that we see in American TV shows and American movies. Do we have that much paranormal happening in South Africa?
More than we know, definitely.
So what kind of stuff have you investigated of late?
Lately, we've been to Middelburg. We did a abandoned farmhouse there with some really nasty activity. Recently, we've been to the Kempton Park Hospital. We've really focused a lot on a lot of private investigations. Like, for instance, someone contacts us and says there's activity in the house. They need more clarity. Then we'll go and investigate the house.
So what kind of activity do people generally report when they call you?
Of late, what's been happening, it's a lot of single mothers with children that are being tormented by things in their home. So it ranges from basically like the kids being pushed down on the bed, they're getting nightmares, they're just basically tormenting the children.
My goodness. And are these particular areas, or does this kind of activity also reach a climax at this particular time of the year?
You know what? I would say that the veil definitely thins this time of the year. Just taking it from my own experience, I've been hearing some strange voices in the house of late. Yeah, I do think it definitely, this time of the year, there's definitely something going on. And but in general, it's a mixed bag. There's all kinds of cases coming in and with different kind of activities.
So then take us through one of these investigations. What would it typically look like? You get a phone call, somebody says to you, look, I've got some strange things happening in the house. What happens then?
So basically, generally you'll do an assessment and ask a couple of questions just to get a feel for what the activity is like. Then, out of experience, we'll sort of say, okay, we don't do cleansing. We don't chase these things away. So if that is the case and that's what's needed, then we'll refer them to someone with the expertise.
So what does that look like once you get into the house? What do you generally do once you get to the person's house?
Well, I would like to say that we've been doing this for a long time. So you do develop sort of a sixth sense for these kinds of things. Basically just energy. You can sense energy. And there's different kinds. You get good vibes, you get bad vibes, you get really extremely negative vibes. So it depends on that. So you'll go into the house and you'll get a feel for it. Or if the house has been abandoned for a very long time, the first one that steps in usually gets attacked off the bat. So yeah, there's different scenarios. So we try and handle it as best we can with the experience we have.
So would you say it's a bit of a mix of science and intuition?
Yes, definitely. More on the science side, because if you go on feeling too much, you're going to alienate your audience or the people that you're doing this for. So we'll really try and use both. We have people in our group who are a little bit more sensitive, and some people in the group are a little bit more scientific. So we try and find the balance in that.
Sure, that sounds fascinating. Well, we're chatting to Wynand van Zyl from Phoenix Paranormal, and we're going to continue this conversation right after we take a quick break.
Connect with the Sandton Times. Email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM and also available on a podcast wherever you are in the world. And we're busy chatting Halloween. We're chatting to Wynand van Zyl, who is with Phoenix Paranormal, an organization that investigates paranormal activity right here in our own neighborhoods. And Wynand and I were just chatting before the break to get a bit of a sense of how they do what they do. And Wynand, what's been sort of the most interesting case that you've come across of late?
Okay, recently on a private case, we had this family who has this house in, I think it's Pretoria North, and they haven't been able to get people to stay there. So they wanted to know a little bit more about what's going on. So we went in and found that it's a very negative entity, and it's really aggressive. It attacked some of our investigators. And so basically what we usually tell them is, listen, what do you want us to do about this? then we take it to them. They need to decide, are they going to sell the place or are they going to try to fight it? So it's really up to them what they want to do with the information afterwards. Historical places, I think, we can talk about the Kempton Park Hospital. It's very notorious and very famous. Probably one of the most famous haunted places in Southern Africa. And that was an experience and a half. I think anybody who has been there can tell you that it's a very interesting place. It's gigantic. So you'll find different things in different places.
Based on the experience you've had with your team and with the cases you guys have done, these spirits or these hauntings, how do they happen? How do they take place? What makes these beings end up in certain places and not in other places?
Right. So I think it comes from two things. The normal thing is, someone dies in a place and, they didn't come to rest, or they're very sensitive about the home that they live in, so they wanted to stay there. So after they deceased, they don't really pass on. In other cases, it's people that conjure evil spirits up in these confined spaces, and it sort of stains the place in a sense, or better way to put it, it sort of infests the place because you're obviously opening a doorway, which is very hard to close once you've opened it. So, that's when mostly the negative entities come through.
Wow.
But I think, Alex, the best way that you can think about it is that paranormal activity will always exist in certain spaces where something has taken place. It's like taking your home, for instance, or the space where you're living. And every year that goes by, you throw a cloth over it. So there's different time brackets in time that something happens. And we just layer the time on top of that, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah,
it's
I'm
like
with you.
It's like when you're painting your house, you first have to scrape off all the paint, and sometimes you're just like, wow, it's been 5 coats of paint already. How old is this place? It's basically the same thing. So the residue stays there. It never goes away.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you about that because selling your house seems like quite a dramatic thing to have to do, and I suppose in many cases people will have to do that.
Well, it depends on the severity of the haunting. If it's just a normal haunting, it's best to just ignore it and eventually it'll go away. But if it's something serious that's impacting the family in a negative way, then it's you have to kind of fight fire with fire. And if something bad like I'm going to use the word now, like a demonic force comes through, you need to fight it with some kind of the opposite. What do you call it?
Positive force.
Yes. So some people are very inclined to ask religious leaders to help with these kind of cleansings, but I think it's become more speciality for mostly mediums and people who do these kinds of cleansings with natural herbs and kind of stuff like that.
Are you finding that these things are happening more and more often, or has it been something that has been around for a much longer period of time, but we haven't been as aware of it?
I think, as the group has grown and we've exposed ourselves and the cases that we worked on, I think it's given people a platform where they can actually express themselves in what they've been dealing with. Personally, I believe that stuff has been happening for centuries. It's only now that we've developed technologies that get a little bit closer to getting to what the causes are and what's been happening with this specific location, and we've got theories that we need that we can use to sort of assess what the problems are.
I mean, I was at an auction a couple of weeks ago, and there were some very interesting pieces of furniture up for sale. Some of them older, some of them newer. And there was one particular piece that we were chatting to with another guy who was standing there, and he said, well, he wasn't going to buy that particular piece because he says you never quite know where that piece has come from and what might come with it. And I thought that was quite an interesting observation. Do you find people buying sort of secondhand goods or antiques, bringing it into their house, and suddenly things start moving around?
I've got personal experience. Me and my wife were very fond of antiques, anything with history, basically. So I bought this very old army helmet, and needless to say that after 2 weeks, I had to dispose of it because it was causing so much, not in a bad way, but like you say, things move. I go into the house to grab my keys, and suddenly a chair has been thrown over or the bed has been moved in a significant way. So that does happen.
Sure. That's frightening. I mean, great advertising for all the retailers who are selling new stuff. Not so great for the people who are selling things that might have a bit of provenance to it.
Yeah. I always advise people, if you love antiques, you shouldn't let it put you off, but you need to be aware of it. So if something strange starts happening, and just be aware of it.
Wow, Wynand, that's quite fascinating. So is this a full-time job? I mean, is this a full-time career that the people of your team engage with, or is this something that you guys do in your spare time?
I would love it to be our full-time job, but unfortunately, look, we don't charge anybody for any of us. Well, if I can call it services, we're just there to help, So we've all got different jobs. So we do this as a side hobby, but it's grown so much over the years that it's becoming a lot of work. But we enjoy it. I mean, that's the great thing about this. We really enjoy it, and we're helping people in the process.
You've described some very intense moments, some very intense encounters. Do you find that you have to go in with a certain positive shield or positive armor when you go and investigate some of these spaces, that you are not personally attacked or personally take these things or these hauntings with you back to your own house?
Yeah, no, there's definitely precautions that you need to take. I mean, that kind of thing can happen. You go visit your aunt and then something latches onto you. So it's always important to be aware of that and make sure that you protect yourself in your own way. Everybody's got different things to do to keep themselves safe, but no, it's definitely something that you need to be aware about.
Wynand, has any of this investigation changed the way you look at life and death and the way you kind of go through life?
Alex, to be honest, no. I think I try to keep it, on a personal level for me, I try to keep it separate. I don't really think of death in terms of that. It's just, for me, it's a personal thing that we explore and we document. That's basically what it comes down to.
Fascinating. Well, there you have it. Wynand van Zyl of Phoenix Paranormal, talking about some of the hauntings in and around South Africa, in and around Johannesburg and Pretoria, and taking us through probably a career that we would normally never be exposed to on Halloween. And I thank him for his time. And as I look at the clock, it's the bottom of the hour, and it's time for a quick musical break.
Back for more?
The SANTON Times Hour continues.
You're listening to the SANTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM, and that was Ray Parker Jr. with the Digital Nature remix of that all-time classic, Ghostbusters. Taking you into the second half of the SANTON Times Hour Halloween edition. My name is André Leibbrandt, and you know how all of this works. If there is anything that sounded good during the show and you didn't manage to get all the details, well, make sure you pop over to the SANTONTimes.co.za and check out this week's show notes for a detailed breakdown of everything we have chatted about, all that we've discussed. And if you want to get some details, some phone numbers, email addresses, some more information, all of that is in the show notes. Also, be sure to check out the social media accounts at SANTON Times, and feel free to get in touch. You can also use the hashtag SANTON Times Hour on your social media posts. Now, we head down to the Western Cape, a beautiful little spot in the Western Cape called Simonstown, with an incredible naval history. And joining me on the line now is André Leibbrandt. He is the creator of the Simonstown Ghost Walk. And André, tell us a little bit more about this walk that you've created.
It started about 7 years ago. It was an idea between myself and another young gentleman. And he did some research, I did some research, and we started this together. He sort of fell off. As the youngsters are, they don't like to spend their Fridays and Saturdays walking with people and telling them about ghosts. And then I basically took it over, and I've been doing that for the last couple of years now. COVID nearly killed the walk, but all seems to be going well now.
Well, it seems a little bit ironic that you talk about ghosts and then the walk might have almost become a haunting of its own. But nevertheless, André, tell us more about the history of Simonstown. I mean, of all the research that you've done, what kind of hauntings and fascinating stories have come out of this town?
To tell you that I was an unbeliever in this kind of thing when I started would be an understatement, because I laughed about it. And to tell you the honest truth, the things that have happened during the walk, you get people that are gifted, All things that I didn't know about when I started this. This happened, a long story. I tell my tale before the walk. And they come in at certain spots. And I'm talking about maybe a year ago I had a walk with gifted people, and today I walk with somebody and they come and point out to me exactly what the people pointed out to me a year ago. So it's very, very odd. Dark figures and stuff like that. Yeah, it's eye-opener, this thing.
A lot of these stories, are they linked to Simonstown's very well-known naval history?
Yes. Look, Simonstown is the 5th oldest little village in South Africa, so it's exceptionally old. It came across as when the Dutch were looking for settlement for winter anchorage. They chose Simonstown for the natural layout and the constant running water coming down the mountain. That happened in the mid-1600s. And from then on, it became this tiny little village. And you must know that in those years, when they came from wherever they came, people were half dying on the ships, or people were, and they were just basically planted in the ground. If this guy liked a tree, plant him under a tree. And then a couple of years later, somebody comes and pitches a house on top of that. And I don't know, somehow it disturbs the people. We've fairly recently had a mass, you can Google this, exhumation in Simonstown at a very historic behind a very historic building, the oldest wine house in South Africa. And if you Google it, there's discrepancy, but a whole lot of bodies have been taken out there.
What are some of the weirdest things that have happened to you on one of these walks?
Like I said to you, the lady and the son, that was the total change over for me. There's a certain spot that I never discussed before on any walk. I actually didn't even know what it was. As we walked past, herself and her son saw a group of school kids sitting outside the building, inviting her son to come in. None of the rest of the group saw this. So we all wanted to know what. And then eventually she said, they saw the group of kids. And then I researched the building, found out it was the old town offices of Simonstown. But before that, it was the first free school in Simonstown. There's no way that she could have known this. I didn't know it. I had to literally go and research this very deeply to find out what that building was all about. And they came and they pointed out the school kids, and it actually was the first free school. So that to me was my change of perception of, is there something weird or not? There is definitely.
Well, there you have it. André Leibbrandt, he's the creator of the Simonstown Ghost Walk. And if you're down in the Western Cape, or you're traveling down to the Western Cape, well, maybe go and check out a spooky evening with André in Simonstown.
From Greater Sandton to the rest of the world, this is the SANTON Times Hour.
Right, a change of pace in terms of content, and a conversation I've been wanting to have for such a long time, having picked up his first book called The Profiler Diaries. Well, forensic psychologist Dr. Gérard Labuschagne, he's brought out a second book called The Profiler Diaries 2. And Gérard, it's great to have you on the SANTON Times Hour. Finally, we're having this conversation. I mean, you must be one of South Africa's most seasoned forensic psychologists involved in criminology. You've been involved in so many investigations in South Africa when it comes to criminal minds. Tell us a little bit more. What drove you to actually put this on paper and put this into a book?
It was something that even when I joined the police back in 2001, in the role as the head of the investigative psychology unit, which is really the police's equivalent of the FBI's behavioral analysis units, working on profiling cases, etc. My predecessor, Mickey, had written books after she'd left, and people from day one said to me, "Are you going to write a book?" Obviously, at that point, I had nothing to write about because I just started. And as the years went by, we were just too busy. There was literally, we could never keep up with the amount of work we had to do, let alone putting aside time to write a book. And I also knew that the kind of thing I'd like to write one day is not something I could write while I'm in the police, because I'd want it to be really an open and honest account of the great stuff, but just as much the bad stuff. And I knew the police wouldn't be very happy with some of the things I was going to say. So that was another reason why I thought it would have to be something I would want to write when I'd left. And when I left in 2016, I just wanted to get away from the work. I guess you could say I was burnt out, probably depressed. And the last thing I wanted to do now was sit and write about the cases that I just kind of needed to get that break from. So it took definitely time. And then, of course, COVID hit in 2020, and suddenly I had the time. My consulting work literally dried up. Here I was, but I think I was also in the right psychological space. And it just was really a coming together of circumstance, event, and where I was, and that kind of led to the first book, and then that did quite well. I think apparently it was recently nominated for SA's Book Awards, one of 5 nominated for the adult nonfiction section. So we'll hear about those results, hopefully, I think in November. And they said, look, hey, another book. And I kind of felt, well, there's definitely enough stories. That's no shortage of cases that I worked on. And for my sins, decided to do number 2, which seems to be doing pretty well, and people seem to like it.
Well, the first one is subtitled From the Case Files of a Police Psychologist, and the second one says From Crime Scene to Courtroom. So it seems like it's a follow-on to the first book, the second book.
Yeah, so I mean, look, you don't have to have read the first one to figure out what's going on in the second one, because, in the second book, each chapter is a case on its own, start to finish. But I do think what you'd get by picking up book 1 first is I kind of speak about myself, which I don't often do. I kind of tend to be quite a private person, but I kind of explain how I went from, high school nearly failing, going to the army, not really knowing what I want to do with my life, to ending up going to university by hook and by crook. I got into university quite fortunately. And then how kind of I flourished in the world of psychology and ended up qualifying, working as a psychologist at a hospital, ending up in the police. So I think you get a bit more insight into me, because the cases aren't just the story. Anybody, a journalist, can research the story and tell about the facts of what happened. It's called the Profiler Diaries because it's my experiencing of working on those cases, my thoughts, my fears, my anxieties, and that of my colleagues. So it's a tale of the case, but also it's the tale of the people working on the case. So that if you read book 1 with that first chapter, you kind of have a bit more insight into who I am. So when I say things or make comments in the chapters themselves, you can really perhaps, I suppose, see me in those comments better if you'd read that first chapter from book 1. And book 1 also has a chapter then about how did we get to the situation where we have so many serials, the unit that was created to deal with it, and puts that into context. So book 2 doesn't have those first 2 introductory chapters, which I do think give you a little bit more context, that when you read book 1 or 2, you kind of perhaps would be able to read it with a bit more depth and insight. But nothing stopping you from buying book 2 and just reading that without having that background.
Well, South Africans seem to have a fascination with crime stories and investigating the criminal mind. I mean, have you ever looked at investigating the people who actually read your book? I mean, have you ever thought about, I know you normally profile the actual serial killers or the people in your investigations, but have you investigated the people who actually read these stories? What drives us to read these stories?
Good question. I mean, I always I often write in my book, I hope you enjoy this, but not too much. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I think I guess all of us to some degree have a fascination with crime because it's something that's in our face every day as South Africans. And I don't know whether it's people want to read about cases that were solved so they can feel safe to know that this guy's behind bars. That it's like watching a horror film. It's sort of getting those, adrenaline flowing, but you're safe. And I suppose wanting to see something good because we see a lot of crime that nothing happens, no cases aren't solved. There's an unsuccessful prosecution. So this is maybe a way of exposing yourself to it, but knowing there's a good outcome at the end of that particular process. But I think in general, people want to be able to delve into this really bizarre stuff that people do, but in a very safe way, which is I think why there's a plethora of books and TV shows and channels dedicated to this type of stuff. And I think in essence, people want to delve into these very horrific cases that get that bit of an adrenaline rush in a safe way because you know it's TV, it's on a piece of paper. But also, I think the solved cases, you have that satisfaction of knowing that the bad guy got what was due to him or her, because the person's been caught and put in jail.
Well, I know we also interviewed the team at Carte Blanche a couple of months ago, talking about this fascinating series called Strangers You Know, or Stranger You Know, and I know that you also featured in some of those episodes. We just have some really fascinating stories where you sometimes look at the story and you think, is this even possible? Like, where did this come from?
Yeah, without a doubt. Like I said, we have phenomenally interesting, bizarre, unusual cases. There's no shortage of those. And I used to speak about a lot of these when I go to law enforcement conferences. That, I mean, I'm not bragging, but we can definitely, hold up with the overseas bizarre and wacky examples. We've had people like Stuart Wilkin in Port Elizabeth, who, he did everything from, raping street children and killing them to sex workers. He killed his own daughter, killed his girlfriend's son. He went back and had necrophilia. There was cannibalism. There was mutilation of the bodies. You just name it, and Stuart Wilkin did it, which, that's like Jeffrey Dahmer did a lot of the same thing. Stuart Wilkin had almost like a broader range of victims. I mean, that's it's phenomenal. We had the Velkom case down in Velkom, where the couple lured Michael Fournier to the graveyard, killed him, cut up his body, kept parts of it in the fridge. That's totally weird stuff that, as I said, not that it's competition, but because competing with stuff that you see, in other parts of the world. We have a high crime rate, so a high murder rate, so automatically you're going to have a high rate of bizarre stuff, just because our overall rate is something that's very high.
Well, it sounds like a streaming service would probably have a field day with some of the stories that we have running around in South Africa, and I wouldn't be too surprised if we see one of those series popping up on international channels somewhere in the future. And I'm sure, Gerard, your stories will probably be a good starting point for some of those series. That's Dr. Gérard Labuschagne, forensic psychologist. 2 great books you need to go check out. They're both called The Profiler Diaries, Part 1 and Part 2. The one from the case files of a police psychologist and the other from Crime Scene to Courtroom. Go check them out. Makes for a great read. Some great insights into South African criminals and criminal minds. And with that, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back after this.
Connect with the SANTON Times. Email editor@santontimes.co.za.
That was Adam Lambert with Ghost Town right here on the SANTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM. Also available as a podcast on all epic podcast platforms. Let me take you back to 2013. And South African businessman Daniel Janse van Rensburg sets off to the West African country of Equatorial Guinea to finalize some business, some work that he'd engaged with a local politician. And within days, or so the story goes, Daniel is arrested and is thrown into a jail that none of us would like to end up in. And that is sort of the preamble to my next interview regarding a book that he's now written called Black Beach, 491 Days in one of Africa's most brutal prisons. And Daniel, I'm thrilled to be joined by you on this interview about this book called Black Beach. And maybe you'd like to pick up on that intro and maybe take us down the story of what happened to you in Equatorial Guinea.
Yeah, it was supposed to be quite a simple business trip as such, because we just returned from a wedding of our best friend where I was the best man. We returned here in Wilderness at, the Sunday evening, and the Monday I left with a overnight bag just for 4 or 5 days that I was going to be away, and only returned 2 years later. Yeah, it just all went pear-shaped. Still really don't know exactly what went wrong. We worked for 2 years to set up a new airline there, and he just cancelled just like that on us, and that's where everything turned upside down.
It's something that people who do business in Africa maybe sometimes think of, maybe sometimes don't think of. Some countries are flagged more riskier than others. Was this the case of Equatorial Guinea? Did you have a sense that doing business in Equatorial Guinea could potentially be a bit dicey?
I've been working there since 2001, and the only time I actually felt uneasy or unsafe was when there was an attempted coup in 2004. For the following 2 years, it was unpleasant to work there as a South African. But after that, it was a fantastic country to work in. I wouldn't have gone back there if I didn't feel like that. But to answer your question about Africa and so on, I mean, any country, I've got friends that were arrested in Dubai for doing normal business. You can't single out a specific country. There's good people and bad people in every country.
Tell us a little bit more about Black Beach. I mean, what is this prison like? I mean, it's known as Africa's most brutal prison, and that's not really a great tagline to have.
I think what makes it completely different, I'm not aware of any other jail in the world that is the same like this, in terms of that women and children, drug addicts, policemen, soldiers, mentally ill people, were all thrown in one cage. There's no distinction. And you left to fend yourself. The women are obviously abused and raped. The little boys, same thing. And, I think there are a lot of brutal men jails, but as a male, it's something different. I think whereas this, you've got this, and that was one of the worst parts for me, was the abuse of the women and the children there. And there's nothing done about it as such. And the other thing about this jail, which is different, is it's only the political prisoners that are actually locked up in cells. They kept up lock and key 24 hours. They let out when the Red Cross come to visit and so on. But other than that, if you're a brutal murderer and so on, and you get arrested and so on, they actually bring them into jail. They lock them up for a couple of days to let their tempers cool down a bit, and then they set free amongst us. And then it's free for all.
Which part did you fall into? Were you a political prisoner, or were you considered sort of part of everything that wasn't political prisoner?
Yeah, no, I had no political problems. I was just a business deal that got wrong, and they tried to put pressure on me that way. Yeah, no, I slept with the rest of the people in the passage.
So what are your first thoughts as you walk into this prison? Because mentally, obviously, and maybe physically, you're preparing yourself for the worst. I mean, having to step into a prison that you're meant not to be in is probably terrible. Having to step into a prison that has got this horrendous notoriety is probably a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I think it was surreal. It doesn't, your brain, as a Christian, I can't even remember that I prayed at that time, because I think I was just numb with the fact where I'm going. Because just before they took me, the South African embassy managed to get to me, because they'd heard that they're going to take me to Black Beach. And the consul came and spoke to me, and she had this ink pad, and she wanted to take my fingerprints, my handprints, palm prints, everything and so on. And I don't understand this. And I'm asking her, why are you doing this, Thandi? I mean, it's you've got a passport, you've got all my records, you've got my laptop, you've got everything of mine, my parents, my wife, like, you don't know me. She said, after a while, she said, it's to identify you in the morgue. So those are things that are going to your head as well. Now you're being sent to this place, and the embassy is already, expecting to identify you in the morgue. And then when I got there, first it was really a humiliating, search and so on. They really very degrading and so on. And I just had a shirt and jeans on. It wasn't like I could smuggle anything in, but they just enjoyed it. When you're thrown into, and I say cage because it is literally like a zoo. They refer to it as a zoo inside there as well, because everybody's put in together. And when they put you inside, they just stormed me. That wasn't definitely not pleasant. And then they try to get me as quick as possible into the building, so that the soldiers and the guards that are watching aren't aware of what's going to happen to me and so on. So that was not nice.
Daniel, how do you keep hope alive in a situation like that? Because you ended up being in there for 491 days. I mean, the first couple of days, I suppose you either live on two sides of the fence. Either you're thinking, okay, this is going to get sorted out quite quickly. I've got lawyers, I've got a company, I've got the embassy who's trying to get me out of here. And then I suppose on the other side, you might say, well, this could go on for a while, and the way things are organized in this place, I could be here forever. How do you work through that?
It was a roller coaster as such, but I didn't want that into the book title, actually, because if you think of it in terms like that, just a year or just 2 years, it's not too bad. There's people that have been for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and so on. It doesn't sound bad, but in context, to survive one day in that prison, just to survive one day, is a miracle. It's and you know, the things that you see, that you witness, that you part of, you know, just to make it to the next day, when you wake up the next morning and you actually realize that you're still around and so on, and you try and get outside to breathe some fresh air and so on, you say, thank you, God, for another day. In terms of days, you know, one day at a time, it was a miracle. On the other side, hope. You know, in the beginning, I was very hopeful because my contract was solid. Even their law protected me. Their judge said I was good to go home. There were two different judges that said the same thing. The South African embassy, they did a full study of my personal life. They even came to my house, checked all my documents, because they couldn't believe I was innocent. They thought there must be something wrong. And so when they started supporting me, I thought, okay, you know, here's really a chance. And while I was in there, President Zuma came, I think, 2 or 3 times. And each time, you know, I was really hopeful that he would remember that there's somebody innocent in jail, because the embassy, they prepared a file for me to hand it over so that it gets addressed and so on. But it was not meant to be.
Well, we don't want to give away everything in the book, because I think people need to go out and actually read this account themselves. And I can see in your eyes, in your persona, that this still touches you to this day. I mean, as I see you reflecting back on some of these moments, I can see that it still hits a nerve in your system that is probably not the most comfortable one. How are you living day to day, having gone through Black Beach?
Yeah, I mean, it was very difficult to write this book. You know, Tracy, who wrote the book for me and read all my scribbles, and I'm left-handed, so, you know, I write like a doctor. And so she had to read those scribbles and put it together and so on. You know, she managed to dig in really deep to try and get, you know, things out. I can't say it's worked as such yet. You know, the one thing that's, since I've gotten home, is I've become a lot more grateful for each single day. You know, we just take one day at a time. We don't focus on tomorrow. We had plans for Christmas, you know, the whole family was going to come visit and so on. And we had big plans for that Christmas. Now we don't go that far even. We focus on each day, be grateful for each day. I try and speak to my mother every day. And then, you know, if once you're grateful for everything, it changes your life as well. And we, you know, I think that the healing process takes a long time. You said I'm a bit sensitive as well. You know, the problems that happened to me there are still happening today. Last week they put most of the opposition party in jail as well. They killed a whole lot of people. It's still happening today. So, you know, hopefully, but with this book, there'll be some light shone as well there, what has happened and what is happening today still.
Absolutely. Well, that's Daniel Janse van Rensburg, Black Beach, 491 days in one of Africa's most brutal prisons. And that's it for another SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM, and as always, available as a podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify. You can connect with us on email, editor@sandtontimes.co.za. That's what you need to type in your address bar. Then you can connect on social media at SANDTON Times. You can visit the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. And as always, you're welcome to send your thoughts, your feedback, your input. I've been getting some great mails from you, and I encourage you to continue sending those. Thank you to all my guests who made the time to be on this week's exceptionally thrilling episode. And then Vincenzo, as always, thank you for dressing up as a vampire and doing your part to make sure that we sound good in the production booth. And to the SANDTON Times team, as well as everyone at Mix 93.8 FM, thank you. And of course to you for listening on Halloween. And let's connect again next week.
That's it for this week. Thanks for listening to the SANDTON Times Hour. And if you enjoyed it, be sure to share it.